Raphael Bain and I were sitting at breakfast in our hotel, chatting lazily and probably both figuring out what kind of hefty commissions we'd get when Zimentu Inc. executives signed our company's $12 million software development proposal on Wednesday morning. We would then fly back from Wichita, Kansas to Indianapolis, Indiana. Then I would drive home to Fort Wayne and at 6:30 p.m. already eat another of the great dinners my wife had prepared. Not many men have managed it as well as I have, I thought as I sipped my coffee. I had a beautiful 47-year-old wife who looked 10 years younger and was an excellent cook, and of course I was about to get a solid commission check. Life really was great, but then my damn cell phone ruined everything with its ringing. I glanced at the caller ID and looked from it to Raphael, which made him wary too. The caller identified himself as a member of the Ohio State Highway Patrol. I was pretty sure I didn't know anyone in Ohio. Les Kendall here, I answered, as I would have answered any other business call. What can I do for you? I heard someone sigh, and then an uncertain young voice came on the line. Mr. Kendall? This is Sergeant Michael Dervitz with the Ohio State Highway Patrol. Your wife, Emily, was involved in a serious car accident and has been transported to the University of Toledo Medical Center. The voice spoke for about another minute or so after informing me that my wife was in the hospital, but honestly all I heard was, wow, wow, wow. The only thing that mattered now was getting to Toledo. What's up, Les? I can help in any way I can, just ask, Raphael quickly informed me. Emmy was in a car accident near Toledo. You need to finish the paperwork on this deal, and I need to get back to my wife. You got it? I said I needed to act fast. I'm on it. You go and keep an eye on Emmy. I'll let the office know what happened. Good luck with everything, he said. I literally ran back to my room, packed my suitcase and my things, and called the airline to change my flight back to Indianapolis. Wichita is not a major airport, so there aren't many flights from there to anywhere in the world, but I was able to fly back to Indy at 9:45. Fort Wayne has its own airport, but there were no flights there from Wichita. I knew it would take me about 9 hours to get to Toledo, so I called my wife's relatives from the car first and told them what was going on. They lived in Pittsburgh and could be in Toledo in about 4 hours. I then called our son at the University of Georgia and our daughter at the University of Colorado and told them everything I knew, which wasn't much. It was my son who first asked what his mother was doing outside of Toledo in the early morning hours when she had to teach in Fort Wayne that day. I have no idea, Jake. Not a clue. I guess I'll find out when I get to the hospital, I told him. Mom's parents are on their way there right now. I guess they'll call me when they find out. About halfway through the trip, I pulled off the highway and called the hospital. First, I endured bingo on the switchboard. Then I got a rejection from the emergency room. I hung up and called my father-in-law. What's going on, Dad? I'm getting no answers from the damn staff when I call there, I said. This is not good, Les. She's very sick, he said. Apparently a semi-trailer fell on her. She's been hit pretty bad. There's a lot of people fussing around. The only thing they told us is that she's hanging on. I was probably an hour away from the hospital when my father-in-law, sobbing, called back. He was talking mostly incoherently, but I realized he was telling me that Emily had died. I pulled the car over to the curb, turned off the engine, and burst into tears. My wife of 24 years was gone. My best friend and soulmate. I cried for probably 15 minutes before I was able to pull myself together and get back on the highway, albeit at a much slower speed. I called both kids and told them the bad news. They took it about as badly as I did. When I arrived at the hospital, my wife's parents and I were hugging in the room where Emily's dead body lay. She looked terrible. The doctor came in to see me and told me that she had died from extensive internal organ damage, although she also had many broken bones, cuts, and scratches. A short time later, a police officer found us and gave us the details of the accident. The accident happened at about 5:45. Emmy was heading west, toward Fort Wayne, on the route of Highway 24. Admittedly, my brain was like a fog, but upon hearing my son's question, I was more than puzzled as to why my wife was outside of Toledo at 5:45 when she needed to be in Fort Wayne at 8 to teach. The policeman didn't get it either when I asked the question out loud. I noticed that both of my wife's parents also looked surprised, although my father-in-law's surprise seemed much more intense. My wife's parents followed me to my home in Fort Wayne, and the kids flew over to join us. We took turns calling various friends and relatives with our sad news. The funeral was scheduled for 5 days later. I think collectively we all shed enough tears to fill 3 rivers in the Fort Wayne area with water. My children and my wife's parents left 2 days after the funeral. My parents stayed 1 more day. Then I wandered around the house like a zombie for 2 days before I decided to start living again. God, she was a beautiful woman. I remembered looking into those big brown eyes one last time on Monday morning when we kissed goodbye before I left for the airport and she left for school. I usually left once a month, and every night I was gone, one of us would call the other. That Tuesday night, she told me that our house always seemed so empty when she stayed home alone. Now it was my turn to be left home alone every night. I sipped my whiskey, remembering our last conversation. Then Jake's voice in my head interrupted my musings. If Emmy was home alone Tuesday night at 9 o'clock when I called, why was she outside of Toledo Wednesday morning when she was in the accident? The police used the driver's license that was in Emmy's purse to track me down the day of the accident. They returned both the purse and her cell phone to me, but I never touched either of them in the weeks that followed. They were on the kitchen table where I had put them when I got home after the accident. To be honest, I had never looked through my wife's cell phone before because I trusted her completely and would never have thought of invading her privacy. After charging her dead phone, I was surprised when I tried to open it and it was password protected. I haven't used her phone for a while now since I have my own, but as I recall, it didn't have a password on it. Not that it was that hard for me to figure out, as I am somewhat computer savvy and knew all of her important dates and events. Looking through the text messages, someone named Simi, at least they were signed Simi, had sent Emmy almost as many recent messages as her best friend Rita Hawthorne. So he was the first one whose messages I looked at. I didn't have to keep going. They corresponded several times almost every day for months, maybe longer, and after a while I stopped reading. The only breaks in correspondence seemed to be when I was away from home. The messages were both flirty and sexual. At least boyfriend and girlfriend, and at worst, lovers. As I read on, I was nauseated and outraged. There was no doubt in my mind that Emmy was having a torrid affair with this guy. Heck, I'd never seen any signs of it. Was I really that ignorant or too gullible? I guess it really mattered at that moment. Finished with her phone, I turned to her purse and carefully laid the contents out on the counter. The only interesting thing I found was her keychain. It contained her car key fob, her house keys, and another key labeled Covington Arms 265. I had no idea what Covington Arms was, so I turned to my buddy Google and found out it was a luxury apartment complex in Toledo. Hell, did she have a key to another man's apartment? I didn't see that as a good thing. The next day I worked until noon, then took the afternoon off and drove to Toledo, where I arrived by mid-afternoon. I entered the lobby of the Covington Arms apartment complex looking like I owned the place and took the elevator to the 2nd floor. Assuming that the owner of the apartment would be at work at that time, I used my key and entered. And immediately realized that Simi Valentine and my late wife had been more than lovers. Throwing a quick glance at a few Thomas Kincaid collectibles in the hallway and living room, I realized that they had been purchased for Emily or by her. There are quite a few similar knickknacks in our house as well. I walked around the apartment examining things. I could tell it was a man's apartment, but it was a woman spending time here. In the bathroom, I noticed a few feminine toiletries, but the biggest surprise was when I looked in the closets and drawers in the master bedroom and found several items of Emmy's clothing there. Even though by now I knew what I was going to find, I was still shocked by what I saw. I walked over to Simi's refrigerator and found several bottles of Corona, as well as an unpeeled lime, which I quickly chopped into usable pieces. I then leaned back in my chair, waiting for my landlord to return. He walked in the door around 4:20 and nearly crapped his pants when he saw me sitting on his couch. Then recognition flashed across his face, quickly followed by concern. Shit. Something's wrong, isn't it? I knew it. She hasn't returned a single text or call in the last 2 weeks, Simi said, not bothering to introduce himself or wait for me to say anything. I was shocked that he seemed to know who I was and didn't seem afraid I'd crush him. Maybe because of that, I decided I'd give him the presumption of innocence to begin with. She didn't write or call because she was dead. She died in a car accident 2 weeks ago, on her way home, I growled. His face turned dead pale before he let out a howl that sounded like the cry of a wounded animal. He collapsed to the floor and broke into genuine sobs. I was stunned by what appeared to be genuine grief. He continued to act as if there was no stranger sitting on the couch drinking a beer. He howled for about 5 minutes before I heard his crying subside. "Hey, man, you want a beer?" "I sliced a lime," I volunteered. He looked at me like I had two heads. "I know it hurts, man. I've had 2 weeks to get used to it," I said. I grabbed beers for both of us and held one out to him. He just kept looking at me, waiting for an explanation. I took a sip of the beer and then gave him that explanation. He listened intently and tears rolled down his cheeks. "I didn't know," he wheezed. "I'm so sorry, Les." My name rolled off his tongue so easily as if he knew me personally. He noticed my surprise and discomfort. "Of course I know who you are, Les. Emily talked about you all the time. Called you the love of her life," Simi said. "But then why you?" I practically whispered. "If I was the love of her life, why did she need another man?" He smiled embarrassedly, I thought. He lowered his gaze to the carpet, then looked at me again. "She didn't need another man," he said. "She was my angel. She helped me pull myself together after my wife died of cancer 5 years ago. I'm also a teacher, and we met at one of those teacher workshops. My wife had passed away a few months earlier. Emily was so easy to talk to. She brought me back to life. We kept in touch after the workshop, and when she told me that you let her visit with me sometimes, I was just overwhelmed by your kindness. We always tried to be discreet, so she used to come here when you were out of town. But it was more than just sex. We had a beautiful relationship. She called me her second husband. She always said you were the love of her life, but I was a pretty good stand-in. I was happy to even be considered that, and I was stunned. I never gave her permission to do anything like what she did. I never gave her permission to be your part-time wife. I practically screamed. I would never give her permission to do that. She lied to you all the time." "Oh, shit," Simi said quietly. "I even asked her to verify it again after she told me that. She confirmed it for me. I just thought..." "You just thought I was one of those guys who likes his wife sleeping with other men?" I asked with sarcasm in my voice. No, he quickly countered. "I just thought you were one of those overconfident guys who doesn't mind his wife getting a little more." "That's definitely not me," I said with a push. "I'm sorry, man. Really," he said. "I totally believed her. I wouldn't have her if she hadn't told me that." "So you've been doing it with her for the last 4 years, at least 2 days a month, sometimes more, I guess," I said. "Yes, For all 5 days of the educational seminar in July," he said. "We each had our own room, but we only used one of the rooms all week. It was probably the only time we were not being extra cautious. Usually 1 or 2 teachers from her school knew what we were doing, but no one ever gave it away to me. I wonder if she told them she had my permission," I said. He shrugged embarrassedly. "By the way, how old are you?" I asked. 31, he replied. "Damn," I said. Even though I was 16 years older than this guy, there was no doubt in my mind that I could punch him in the face because I was bigger, stronger, and meaner. However, I truly believed that he was telling me the truth about Emmy, telling him that I had allowed her to have sex with him. Despite how much I wanted revenge on Simi, I knew it was wrong. It was mostly about my late wife. "Explain to me how her visits usually went. I need to know why Emmy was leaving so early," I asked. Simi explained to me that on the first day of my visits, my wife would usually leave Fort Wayne right after graduation. She would then stay overnight, but get up an hour earlier to travel the extra distance by car to get to her school on time, and then leave again for Toledo at the end of the school day. On the second day, she would repeat the procedure, and on the third day, she would leave again for her school, and then come back to our house in the afternoon, so she was home a few hours earlier than I was. Seems like too much time is spent making a little extra money, I muttered aloud, more to myself than to him. I wasn't the least bit part-time, he said, defensively. She said she loved me. We loved each other. I was ready to be her second man. It was a lot easier in the summer, he added. Since we both had weekends off, she went here as soon as you left on a business trip and then stayed the night until the day you were due back. And for the last 2 years, you've let her spend a couple times with me for 5 days each during summer vacation. I always thought that was beyond what a loving husband could do for his wife. At first, I was puzzled by these 5-day vacations he was talking about. Then I remembered that Emmy and a couple of her friends had gone to Makino Island in Michigan for 5 days both last summer and the summer before. At least, that's what she told me. The hamster in the wheel that was my brain was doing its best at that point. She even took time out of my day when I was home to screw her lover. I didn't respond. We both sat in silence. His gaze clouded over and he cried again. I realized. I even felt a little sorry for the guy. It wasn't his fault he'd befriended the girl who'd eventually stolen his heart, but had lied to him almost as much as she'd lied to me. We sat in silence for a few more minutes, finishing our beers. Perhaps in another time and place, we could have been friends. Don't you want to take her things home? Simi asked. The only thing I want to keep is our picture. I'm pretty sure you don't want that. I hadn't noticed that picture before when I wandered around his apartment. In this picture, they were pictured with Simi standing behind him. He had his arms around her as if protecting her. The two of them were smiling widely as they looked at the person who took the picture. They looked so in love, which they really were. My heart dropped even lower than it was before. It's a great picture, Simi. You can keep it and all her things that are here. I don't need anything, I said, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. I got up and left the apartment without even saying goodbye to him properly. It seemed like it took forever to get back to my apartment. Anger. No, rage quickly replaced my grief. Emmy had lied to me and cheated on me for 4 years. She had abused my trust in her and disrespected me in the most disgusting way. And worst of all, I could never get her to reconcile with me. The damn bitch. About halfway home, I thought about what I would tell my kids, our parents, and the rest of the family. My plate was full of pain, and believe me, I really needed to share. Why should I be the only one eating this dish? I've been told that one of my best qualities is my analytical nature. In fact, I have never been inclined to act rashly, especially under fire of criticism. Some people have criticized me for this trait, mistaking my calmness under pressure for a lack of passion. In particular, I've weighed the pros and cons of telling my children that their mother was a lying whore. I know that both kids loved Emmy to bits, but I know now that she didn't deserve all that love. By her lies and cheating on me, she would lead to the breakup of our family, which wouldn't happen now because she was dead. Dead because she drove to Fort Wayne straight from her lover's apartment in Toledo, while she should have been in our house preparing for the day ahead. She didn't cause the accident, but she shouldn't have been there at all. If she hadn't cheated on me, telling the kids would probably have broken their hearts and shattered their worlds. But by not telling them, I was essentially covering up her duplicity and causing even more pain. Why did it all have to come down on me? But being a parent, a good parent, in my opinion, means protecting your children from pain as much as possible. When all was said and done, I realized that I would rather take Emmy's betrayal with me to my grave than tell my children about it. It would hurt them to find out for themselves, but it wouldn't hurt as much if I came out and told them. You know, blame it on Messenger. I was pretty sure Jake already suspected that his mother was literally in the wrong place at the wrong time for the wrong reason, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Because she died in an accident, she was able to keep the love and devotion of her children. If she hadn't died, her deception would have been exposed. And what would the children's reaction have been? I guess we'll never know, so I would have done the right thing by my children. However, my thoughts about my parents were far from that charitable. I decided that with both groups I could share my pain, without secrecy, and they would have to swear that they would never tell their children about anything. I took both parents out for a nice dinner at a favorite restaurant the night before my children were due home for Christmas break. I figured my parents would have an easier time getting over the news, but would be there to help Emmy's parents through what I'm sure would be a traumatic experience at best. I loved Ralph and Phyllis almost as much as I loved my own parents, but I needed to let some of my pain go in order to perhaps heal and move on with my life. I had loved Emily with all my heart for 24 years. Then, within 2 weeks, I had to first experience her shocking death and then learn of her stunning infidelity during the last 4 years of our marriage. I went from having a near-perfect marriage with a near-perfect wife to discovering that my now-deceased wife was a lying whore and my marriage for the last 4 years was a sham. By this point, I had spent months berating myself for not noticing Emmy's cheating and for the fact that I might have played some part in encouraging her to cheat on me. Obviously, I'd done something to make her go to bed with another man. Didn't I satisfy her? I know Simi told me for that reason, but I'm just a regular man, and it hurts like hell to be hornswoggled after 20 years of marriage. According to Simi, Emily told almost no one about her affair. 1 or 2 friends met her and Simi at a seminar, and I assume the 2 friends she used as cover while shopping probably knew, but it seems my late wife was smart enough to remember the old adage about keeping secrets. Don't tell anyone, but if you have to, tell as few as possible. When Emily was alive, our house was always the place to be for the holidays. We have 5 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and spacious living and family rooms. This meant that there were usually a few people staying with us for a few days and a few more family members coming over for vacations. Emily, who, as a teacher, always had long Christmas vacations, was a wonderful hostess and a great cook, and she fluttered around the house like an overgrown Christmas elf. My 4 parents and I made reservations at an upscale Italian restaurant for the first night of our family reunion. The 5 of us were enjoying appetizers and wine for our first course when I tapped my knife on my wine glass to get the attention of everyone at our table. "How many of you knew that Emily had an affair on the side for the last 4 years of her life?" I asked boldly and clearly. My mother dropped her fork on her plate, and that was the only answer I heard immediately. My parents and Emmy's father were horrified, while Emmy's mother looked puzzled. The others let it pass their ears, but I didn't. I knew I needed to talk to my mother-in-law privately when we got back to my house. I had told both sets of parents in some detail about Emily's affair, as far as I was concerned. My father-in-law, Ralph, tried his best to hold back in public, but I could see the tears streaming down his cheeks. Emily was Daddy's little girl, and I knew he was in almost as much pain as I was when I found out. I needed an outlet, but honestly, I wasn't very proud of myself when I finished my story. The drive home in my Escalade passed in almost complete silence. In particular, I warned everyone in the car not to say a word about Emmy's affair with anyone in the family, particularly my children. I said they didn't need to know about it, but if they did find out, I wouldn't want it to happen on their first Christmas without their mom. At least they deserved it, and the others agreed with me. Ralph and my parents, looking extremely exhausted, went up to their bedrooms as soon as we got home. Before all 3 of us went upstairs, my mother-in-law told her husband she would sit with me and have a glass of wine each. When everyone was upstairs, I poured a glass of Cabernet for my mother-in-law and a 12-year-old Glenmorangie Scotch for myself, and the 2 of us headed into the living room. Phyllis Rogalski was still a beautiful woman in her 60s, and so I was always sure that Emily would keep her looks for a long time to come. At that moment, however, Phyllis's face took on a dead-pale hue as she sat next to me on the couch, concentrating on the pattern of the living room rug. "Did you know, Mom? Did you?" I squeezed out a barely audible whisper. "How could you let this happen? How could you not say anything? How could you not tell me?" Phyllis took a sip of wine and sighed heavily. She turned her whole body toward me, but she couldn't look me in the eye. She trembled and tears ran down her cheeks. From what Emmy said, he was a really nice young man who was in such a sorry state after his wife died of cancer. They met about a year after her death at an educational conference and hit it off immediately. She said she was very glad she was finally able to get him to talk, my mother-in-law began. "Emmy stopped by his house several times when you were away, and they just talked for hours until one day she finally kissed him. It wasn't long before they, moved on. She said she loved him. Not as much as she loved you, Les, but she had real feelings for him. And what did you do, Mom? Just sit by her? Cheered her up? Reminded her that she was a married woman, the mother of your grandchildren? I hissed. Yeah, I think I was encouraging her all right. He was a good-looking young guy, and the kids were both in school. And you were off on your little travels. Why shouldn't she have a little fling on the side? Don't tell me you never cheated on her during those sales trips, she said. Never. I never broke my vows. Ever. How could you even think such a thing? I wheezed. I'm sorry, Les. I guess in my mind I was trying to rationalize the unthinkable, giving her a way out. I was so wrong, she said, sobbing. Think about it, Phyllis, I continued. Maybe if you hadn't encouraged her, she wouldn't have gotten on this path at all and would still be alive. It's just that maybe you could have played a part in her death. I could see the gears turning in my mother-in-law's brain. If it was possible, she looked even more shaken than she had a few minutes ago. For several minutes, we sat in silence. Finally, she looked me straight in the eye. I'm so sorry, Les, that I may have played some part in my daughter's death and in her cheating on you. You didn't deserve her betrayal, and you didn't deserve mine either. Thank you for not saying anything at the restaurant in front of Ralph. I knew you'd have realized it by then. He would never have forgiven me. I guess I wouldn't blame him. I guess I should apologize to your parents, too, sometime in the next few days when I can be alone with them. She got up, took her glass to the kitchen, and went upstairs, leaving me alone with my thoughts. My kids arrived the next day, and our first Christmas without Emmy went pretty well overall. I had a lot of Christmas meals and snacks prepared, and for the holiday table, almost every female relative and a few of the men made something in their own way. Emmy's name was constantly mentioned, and we shared all sorts of wonderful memories. I occasionally caught glances from my parents and Emmy's parents that they threw in my direction. I was both surprised and delighted that my son never brought up why my wife died on the highway near Toledo. Emily's parents usually stayed with us until New Year's Eve, but that year, for some reason, they went home a couple days early. I was surprised when Ralph broke the news to me until I saw my mother-in-law's black eye. She claimed she had fallen the night before after drinking too much wine in the kitchen with my mother. I wished him a happy journey home and just nodded at her. It was the most I could say to her since she had confessed her feelings to me. My parents walked into the living room a couple hours later, both with wide smiles on their faces. My mom held an ice pack in her right hand. Don't ever mess with a crazy mom, my dad said, wrapping my mom in a tight hug. You know your mom always has your back. She gave that stupid bitch a good kicking when Phyllis told your mother what she'd done. Thanks, Mom. From what I saw a couple hours ago, it's killer, I said with a chuckle. I waited until everyone had gone home from the holidays before I started fixing up my house. I gave the kids what they had picked out of Emmy's stuff. I tried to give Jake her engagement ring, but he flatly refused. No, I wouldn't give that ring to any girl I was going to marry. It's ruined, he said, not explaining anything, but assuming I knew what he meant. Most of Emmy's remaining belongings had been given to the Salvation Army, though my daughter wanted to take her precious Kincaid collection. Things like pictures of her and the kids, they were all separated. The kids left all the pictures of just the two of us to me, but after they left, I threw them in the trash, including our big wedding picture that always hung in our bedroom. Both kids noticed that Emily had disappeared from my house when they came to visit me. Over the course of the year, I even replaced a few pieces of furniture. Jake graduated and got a job on the East Coast, so he stopped by the house to get everything he needed from his room. He stayed home for 3 days before leaving to start his career. On his last night home, he finally addressed the elephant in the room. We barely mentioned Emily the entire time he was there, and I noticed he was trying to stay on tiptoe away from me. We ate dinner and then both drank beer. She cheated on you, Dad, didn't she? Jake asked quietly. She was coming home from her lover's when the accident happened, wasn't she? That was the only reason she could have been on the road at that time. I looked at him and saw the remorse on his face. I grinned, realizing that I had never seen such emotion from his mother in all the times she had cheated on me. "Yes, Jake. Apparently for the last 4 years," I answered as quietly as he asked. "She was on her way to school from her lover's house when she was run over by a truck." "Did you know, Dad? I mean before the accident?" he asked. "I had no idea, Jake. But you were the one who gave me the idea when you first asked me why she was where she was when the accident happened. Once I recovered from the initial shock, I began to wonder the same thing. I realized it when I checked her phone, but decided to do my own investigation when I discovered a strange key on the keychain in her purse. It turned out to be the key to her lover's apartment. I took the day off work and went to his place. She had clothes there, toiletries, and even some of that damn Kincaid stuff. Can you believe that?" I saw his jaw drop in surprise. "You actually went into this guy's apartment? You could have been arrested," Jake said. "Maybe, but I had a key, which was obviously given to your mother, so—" But the worst part was when he finally showed up. He greeted me as a close friend, ... In short, he thought I was fully aware of your mother's and her activities. Said she had told him that I had given her permission, and he thanked me. His wife died a couple years ago, and your mother, according to him, saved him." "So you believed him then?" Jake asked. "Oh, yes. He gave me all the answers to all my questions, too. Nothing to hide, even when I told him your mother lied to him. He sort of apologized, but pointed out that he totally believed her when she told him I'd agreed to it. I considered kicking his ass for nothing, but honestly, I'd mostly put that on your mother. I never thought she was capable of that," I said. "So, you're really mad at her?" "Until now," he said rather than asked. "The fact that she's gone has no bearing on how you feel, even if you've been married all these years." He looked at me hopefully. I just shook my head. "If she hadn't died and I had found out, I would have divorced her in a heartbeat, plain and simple. She cheated on me for 4 years out of the 24 we lived together. Death does not give her the right to occupy my heart," I stated. "Unfortunately, I understand, Dad," Jake said. Marley returned home after her freshman year and was busy trying to enjoy her last summer before starting her professional career. She had an internship in the public relations department at a local firm. If she noticed that her mother's presence in the house was almost nil, she said nothing. I received a 7-figure settlement from the company whose truck hit Emily, and along with my life insurance proceeds, I would have been able to retire much better than I had originally planned, but in my 48 years, I figured I had at least 10 years before I closed my eyes. The only thing was that I didn't have anyone to share my life with, and I had no desire to find that person. After getting burned so badly by Emily, I became very wary of women in general. I admit that being alone in my house after Marley went back to college for her senior year got tiresome over time. At first, I hardly ever went out anywhere because I had no idea how to do it, which is dating. Emmy and I had been married for 24 years and together for 26, which meant that the last time I went on a date, people were arguing about whether or not a blowjob counted as a real sexual act. While I was trying to figure out what to do about dating, I literally had an epiphany in the person of Sylvie Hellman. Sylvie was one of Emily's best friends from the school where she taught, so I didn't think much of it when she called me one evening about 6 months after Emily's death. I figured it was one of those thinking of you calls, because we had met several times over the years at school events. I could tell Sylvie was feeling awkward as we exchanged simple pleasantries, but after a minute she came around to saying she was calling to ask me out on a date. I was surprised and flattered. Sylvie was about my age and was still an attractive woman with a rounded shape, shoulder-length brown hair, and green eyes. About 10 years ago, she had divorced her unfaithful husband. "Emily always bragged about what a wonderful husband you were. I guess I don't want to see a good man go to waste. I mean, if you're ready to date," she said quietly. The first date was followed by a second, and then a third. The third was significant because at the end of the evening, she invited me over to her house, and we both knew it was about sex, so to speak. I didn't need to remind Sylvie that it had been almost a quarter of a century since I'd had sex with anyone other than Emily. She acted aggressive at first, but I think out of respect for me, took things slowly and casually. I had to turn away to breathe in more oxygen before getting back to work. Her kicking and screaming continued until I had to lean on her hip. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised at how noisy Sylvie was in the bedroom, because outside of it she was a big talker. After we cuddled in silence for a couple minutes, she came around again, flooding with tears as we lay face to face. "Oh my God! Oh my God! That was wonderful, Les. Just wonderful." Sylvie blurted it out almost in a burst of emotion. "You're so much better than Emily said. I can't believe she had you and Simmy. What a lucky woman." I waited until she finally stopped talking and kissed her hard. Her eyes were closed and a wide smile shone on her face. She fell asleep soon after, and I lay awake, digesting what she had just said before I finally dozed off too. In the morning, we showered together and I slept with her 2 more times. We then went out for breakfast at a local diner called Panera. I realized that she was experiencing what I call a sexual high and decided it was time to talk to her again. "Did Emily really say I'm not good in bed?" I asked quietly during a pause in our conversation. Sylvie blushed thickly, apparently having just remembered what she had said to me last night after sex. She looked around for a few seconds before turning to me. "Yeah, that's what she said," Sylvie practically whispered. "That's why Nancy and I had encouraged her when Simmy first started talking to her at the conference. She said it a lot. Said you were a great husband, a great guy, but a worthless lover." She looked guiltily into my eyes, seeing the hurt expression on my face. "Yeah, I think we did the wrong thing by encouraging her, no matter how good you were in bed." "Is that what you think?" I grumbled. "She cheated on me for 4 years, and you and Nancy encouraged her and covered for her. I know about her supposed trips to Makino with you girls." She blushed thickly again. "At least I know she lied about your accomplishments in bed. You're great in bed, Les. I'd do it again in—" She stopped mid-sentence as she looked me in the face. "I really screwed up big time, didn't I?" she asked. "I'd say both you and Nancy did," I replied. "You do realize that she died on the way back from her lover. She wasn't supposed to be there at all. She probably wouldn't have been there if you and Nancy hadn't been so damned encouraging." Needless to say, there were no more dates with Sylvie. Sometimes after work, I would stop by a quiet Irish pub a few blocks from my house. It had good food and a large supply of good liquor that didn't need to be diluted to keep you from choking. Most of the people gathered were probably between 35 and 50 years old and not badly off, but there were few single women. I knew I needed to step out of my comfort zone if I was going to seek out women to date. Several women in my office offered to set me up with female friends or relatives. I turned them down for the first year or so, but decided it was time to ask for help. I walked into the office of our first vice president of sales, Jerry Holmes, who had earlier offered to help me, and sat in the chair across from her desk. "Okay, I admit that I'm pathetic. I need help meeting women," I told her. Jerry smiled at me. "So, do you want me to clean you up or give you a list of names and phone numbers?" she asked as I fidgeted in my chair. "Where do your single friends go to meet men? How about you tell me about it?" I asked. "I can recommend a few places for you to go for that," she told me. She gave me a list with 5 places on it. I planned to visit them on the next 5 Friday nights. On the first Friday night, I went to an upscale restaurant bar with a jukebox playing classic rock music. There were a decent number of women there, but I only talked to 2 or 3 during the evening. On the second Friday night, the establishment was actually a bar that also served food and had a small dance floor. I was sitting at the bar when a group of 5 women walked in and headed to a booth on the side of the establishment. I waited for the waitress to take their orders before I checked them out and found one of the most beautiful women I had ever seen in the Fort Wayne area. She looked to be no more than 25 years old. She had long, black braids down to her elbows, big brown eyes, and an angelic face. She was wearing a peach-colored dress with a deep neckline that exposed her large breasts and only reached halfway down her muscular, beautifully shaped mocha-colored legs. I know I stared at her for at least a minute before I was able to tear my gaze away and found that sitting next to her was a good-looking, lush woman about 45 years old. The two looked so much alike that I thought they were mother and daughter. As you might expect, a crowd of young guys soon came to their table, and most of the men's eyes were fixed on the incredibly beautiful woman. Soon she left to dance with one of the young guys and the crowd dissipated a bit, leaving 4 other women in the booth. Seeing an opportunity, I approached the pretty 45-year-old woman and asked her if she wanted to dance with a slightly inept but well-intentioned middle-aged guy. "Yeah, where is he?" she asked cheekily, before giving me a 1,000-watt smile and taking my outstretched hand. I'm pretty sure half of my brain had shut down because I remember almost nothing of the next 15 minutes. When I came to, she was sitting across from me at a table with 2 friends, smiling at me with her beautiful white teeth and holding my left hand. When the waitress came over and asked what we would be drinking, my dance partner looked at me and said she would be drinking the same thing I was, so I ordered 2 shots of Don Julio tequila on the rocks. And you don't give the impression of someone who drinks tequila neat. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Absolutely," she said as the waitress walked away. "Who am I impressing?" "A beautiful, confident, divorced woman who is here to look after her incredibly beautiful, unmarried niece and her 2 pretty friends," I answered confidently. "It was incredibly accurate. Do you also measure height and weight?" she said. "I'm pastel, by the way." I frankly looked her over from head to toe, raising my eyebrows and nodding. I'd suggest adding more mocha, but I never argue with a beautiful woman. I might opt for pastel colors. She chuckled and smiled. Her voice sounded lyrical. Her laugh was charming. "And who are you?" she asked. "Completely charmed," I replied nonchalantly. "I'm also less." "Oh no, you're definitely more," she quickly parried. "There's still a lot to figure out. How did you know I was divorced?" "That's easy," I replied. "You're beautiful. You're not a child anymore, and you don't wear a wedding ring. A beautiful woman like you would probably be married by now, so you must be divorced or the biggest bitch in the world, so I guess divorced. And you look so much like the pretty young lady at your table that you could be her mother, but hanging out with your mom isn't cool, so you must be the favorite aunt." She looked at me obliquely, then she cast a candid glance at my left hand, and I saw the wheels turn. "You're also divorced because you don't wear rings," she concluded. "You seem to be good at guessing, so I'm guessing you've been single for a while. And since you're a good-looking white guy, I think you're a walker." "Whoa, I'm not sure if I'm insulted or not, but I'm definitely not a walker. You're almost the first woman I've been alone with since my wife died in a car accident almost 2 years ago," I said. She furrowed her eyebrows upon hearing my statement. "I'm sorry about your wife," she began, but I quickly stopped her. "I would have divorced her, but she was run over by a truck when she was coming home from her lover," I put in. "That's about how I found out she was cheating on me. This is only the second time I've been out hunting, so to speak. I found out that 10 years ago she divorced her husband who cheated on her twice. She forgave him after she caught him the first time, but was done with it when she caught him again 5 years later. Even 10 years later, she admitted she still had trust issues. I told her I completely understood. Turns out she was actually 45 years old and had a 25-year-old son. We must have talked for about an hour when one of the women sitting at the table with her and her niece came over and said the group was dispersing to their homes. Pastel stood up and thanked me for a pleasant time, then took a pen out of her purse and wrote her phone number for me on a napkin. I got up from my seat when she did, so she leaned over to me, put her hands on my chest, and kissed me gently on the lips. Her lips were luxurious and as soft as a pillow. The scent of her perfume was subtle but delightful. A mop of black curls covered our faces as we kissed. Please call soon," she murmured softly. The young woman who came with her raised her eyebrows in surprise. Pastel took her hand and they headed for the door. I stood there mesmerized, feeling as if I was 15 years old again and had just received my first real kiss from Susie Barlow. I gulped down the rest of my tequila and headed for the door. Once outside, I dialed her number. "Do you like waffles?" "I know a great Greek cafe that makes amazing waffles," I said. "Then we could do the botanical gardens or dance if you want to get your delicious ass kicked. You do realize I'm in a car with 4 young girls, so keep your thoughts about my ass to yourself, please," she said with a giggle. "Yeah, I'd love to have breakfast with you." And the botanical garden sounds tempting, too. I heard the others laughing and telling her off as she gave me her address so I could pick her up in the morning. I heard someone ask if I knew she wasn't a virgin anymore, which made me laugh into the phone. "He heard it, bitch," she said to those in the car. "Don't ruin my mood. He seems like a good guy." "I'm a nice guy. Just ask me," I said, making her giggle. "This is what happens when you try to be nice and look out for these little kids. No respect," she said to both me and them. Maybe because I'd been with Emmy for so long, going out with Pastel was brand new and exciting, like being given a second chance to relive my youth. She was fun and funny, smart and witty, sensual and passionate, and we didn't even have sex after 6 dates. That was on me, and she reprimanded me about it. We made out on her couch for quite a while like horny teenagers, and I wasn't sure if I should make my move. Yeah, I know it's lame, but it had been so long for me. Les, stop thinking and start acting. It's time, she said, looking me straight in the eye. I smiled embarrassedly. "I'm sorry I wasn't more aggressive, babe. You probably won't believe this, but I've only had 3 sexual partners in my entire life, including my late wife. In fact, there's only been one since my late wife," I said quietly. "Time for number 4, darling," she declared with a bright smile. "I assume you remember how to undress a woman." Fortunately, I still remembered how to handle a woman's body without a road map. However, what I hadn't counted on was Pastel's strength, which far surpassed Emmy's. A minute later, Pastel started to get out of bed, ostensibly to clean herself up, but I grabbed her hand, turned her back to me, and bestowed a scalding kiss that made her moisture dry on my lips and face. I don't think she ever tasted herself because she looked surprised at first and then pleased. I pulled her closer to me and hugged her. "We're not done until we've pressed against each other for a while. It's part of my bonding process," I said. "I like the way you're thinking, Les. Pastel liked my way of thinking so much that a year later she agreed to marry me.